Welcome to our new online class. In this class, over the next 9 weeks, we're going to be studying the 8 deadly thoughts. So this is lesson 1, an introduction to ascetic theology. So what can a Christian do to become more loving? All of us, whether a new Christian or a seasoned veteran, continually fail to obey Christ's commandments. It troubles us that we do not love our neighbors as ourselves. We do not love God with all our heart and mind, soul, and strength. We may try, we find ourselves still coming up short again and again and again. We know that we are forgiven through Christ for our failures. We are reminded every Sunday in worship as we confess our sins, and we are assured of our grace, and we remember our baptism and forgiveness. But still the question remains: what can Christians do to grow in love of God and of neighbor? So here's something to think about. Think of a time you found it difficult to love another person. What attitudes did you have instead of love? Why do you think you found it difficult in that instant to love that other person? Take a moment and reflect on that. Did you know that there's a whole branch of theology devoted to specifying the major hindrances to Christian love and the practices to overcome them? It's called Ascetical Theology. Let's get that. Did you know there's a whole branch of theology devoted to specifying the major hindrances to Christian love and the practices to overcome them? It's called Ascetical Theology. In this study, we're going to draw on a small part of the ascetical teachings of the 4th century desert fathers and mothers who lived in the wilderness of Egypt and Syria, and we'll look for ways that can help us today. Particularly valuable is their treatment of the most common and basic things which we all have to deal with: food and drink, sexual desires, material goods, the need to compare ourselves to others, resentment, failure, success, and self-centeredness. These temptations give rise to what were traditionally called the 8 deadly thoughts. But in the 6th century, Pope Gregory the Great revised the concept of the 8 deadly thoughts and renamed them, guess what, for 10 Stephen points? Yes, the 7 deadly sins. You can find out which one was cut by studying this whole series. Now, the earlier tradition of the Desert Fathers and Mothers, however, stresses that what human beings wrestle with are not sins so much as thoughts, which stir up passions and cause emotional turmoil. We are not evil people just because we find ourselves thinking these deadly thoughts. In fact, the 8 deadly thoughts are modeled on the temptations Christ faced in the wilderness. And every Christian can expect sooner or later to be assailed by them in seeking to follow Christ. These 8 deadly thoughts are like cholesterol. They fill the arteries, so to speak, and the flow of the Spirit is not able to get through easily, and sometimes is choked off altogether. So something to think about. The Desert Fathers and Mothers say we all have to deal with issues of food and drink, sexual desires, material goods, the need to compare ourselves to others, resentment, failure, success, and self-centeredness. Do you agree or disagree? Would you add anything to that list? If we are not in some way able to master these deadly thoughts, we will be tempted by them into sin. Even when we do not commit sins, our unruly passions seriously hinder us from following Christ. These passions are easily aroused, and we are so constantly distracted in our struggle with them that we are unable to be attentive to others or to grow in our awareness of God's presence. So something else to think about. What are some of the sins, dangers, and hindrances to following Jesus that you have observed or experienced that come from issues around food and drink, sexual desires, material goods, the need to compare ourselves to others, resentment, failure, success, and self-centeredness? What are some of the traps you find yourself falling into because of these issues? The term ascetical or ascetical comes from the Greek ascesis, or discipline. St. Paul described the Christian life as a race to be run, requiring training or discipline if it is to be run well. He also pointed out that a boxer must acquire skill in order to fight well. This is why Conor McGregor is not going to beat Floyd Mayweather. In order to achieve the physical fitness and skill necessary to run or fight well, a person must train and practice, and this means to submit to discipline. Paul transferred this obvious physical fact into the spiritual realm. Those who seek to follow Christ, even though forgiven, are still weak and rebellious in various aspects. Unless they make the effort to overcome their weaknesses and rebellious attitudes, they will be greatly hampered in their efforts to follow Christ. So just as an athlete has to prepare mentally, physically for the sport they're going to play, so we need to prepare and train ourselves to follow Christ, because it is not an easy path. So something else to think about. How have you intentionally worked to become more spiritually disciplined? What came easier and what did you struggle with? Did you notice results in your actions, thought life, and relationship with God? So that's the end of our introductory lesson. Hopefully you have a chance to think about those things and prepare yourself as we go through this study looking at the 8 deadly thoughts. How they can interrupt our lives, how they can affect our relationship with Jesus, with God, and with each other. And what are some ways we can overcome them, where we can love God, love ourselves, and love our neighbor even better. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to talking again next week.